I'm Sally Schwartz. I work in the Center for Financial Wellness. And today we have Dr. Jill Purdy. She's a professor at Milgard and also director of the Center for Entrepreneurship. And then we have Erin Galino, who is Chief Financial Officer and Financial and Administrative Officer at the Port of Tacoma. And she also sits on our Milgard Executive Council. So she's very involved with the business school and helping us shape directives. So we want to welcome them today. And we're going to start with a little fun video. I'm just going to cut it off after a few minutes because it's really long, but it'll kind of set the stage.
Like a great fit for this job.
What are your salary expectations? Ready to talk about the money? Welcome to the Interview Game by Indeed, where we show you how and how not to answer interview questions. There's an effective and less effective way to answer questions about salary during an interview. Say hello to Sam, Keenan, and Amy, who are interviewing today for a software engineering job. The candidate with the best answers will move forward in our interview process. I'll be picking the best answers with a little help from my crisp scorecard. That's right. Your answers should be crisp, confident, realistic for your lifestyle needs, informed by research, short, and positive. Candidates, ready to do this?
Yes!
We're going to start today with Sam. What are your salary expectations?
Well, I know that the national average for software engineer is about 130 grand. That's more than I make now. But this is a harder job. So 130,000 makes sense to me.
Sam, you live in a pretty expensive place. Is that number aligned with the local cost of living? Average local salary? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. I honestly don't know.
Sam had definitely done her research and knew what the national average was, but you should always give a range. And not that it's any of my business, but if you don't have a budget, how will you know what you need to earn? Thank you, Sam. And hello to you.
I'm going to absolutely refute what he just said about always giving a range. So.
Yes.
I was told you should give a range too.
Yeah.
Well, the upper end, maybe.
Maybe.
You know what? Why don't we stop?
We can pause it.
We can stop it here.
Going.
And one of the things that they'll do is that this will be it's on Indeed, so it's available to you to watch.
Yeah.
So, but I think the concept of crisp and that example kind of sets the stage.
Excellent. Yeah. So
Okay.
let me say why I think you should not give a range. It has to do with the psychological concept of anchoring. The idea that any number that gets thrown out serves as an anchor. If you're an employer and you're interested in paying, keeping your budget and paying somebody what they're worth, but at the lower end, you give a range, they're going to anchor on the lower end. So you might as well have just said one number in those circumstances. So it's generally better, if you're going to give a range, keep it a very tight range and recognize that the bottom end of that range is typically where people are going to be thinking. It's better off to just say, I was anticipating that the salary would be about this amount. And is that in line? You can ask a question back, right? Is that in line with what you are paying other people that have my experience? So you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. So, and we're gonna. Yeah. I think we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the kind of the global labor markets, and then kind of work our way into some of the examples about what can you do to get to that point that you can have the salary conversation, and then kind of lead into salary and what is total compensation. So, one of the things that we were talking about in preparation for this is, if you have, friends, family, others that have been in the labor market the last couple of years, it's been pretty tight. And still unemployment's around 4%. But I think in terms of the expectation as you're going out into the labor market, things are starting to shift. You'll see companies are laying off. If you work for the federal government right now, you're not really sure where things are going to shake out. So I think really understanding as you're preparing to go out and compete for jobs, with your degree, is being realistic that it may not be what some of your friends or others may have experienced in the last couple of years. And so, just having that mindset, we're still, like I said, in a very strong, job market overall, but it's not quite as tight as
I think that's an excellent point. And I think we've all heard stories about those people who've gotten the great job offers or competing job offers and all of these perks and things. But I think that's less common, given, especially in this part of the world where you have a lot of highly qualified people, but we've also had a lot of layoffs at big firms in the area. And while this is most visible in the technology sector, it's happened in other places as well. And so one of the assets that you might have is coming in as someone who is on the lower end of experience, which means you're less expensive for a company to hire. And if you've got eagerness and qualifications and a desire to keep on learning, you might be the right fit for them. So it's not necessarily a disadvantage to be less experienced.
Yeah. So, some of the things we talked about salary range, on that video, which is great. That kind of, but also being prepared. And there is so much information available today. And in the state of Washington, there is legislation that requires employers with more than 15 employees.
15, I think, is the magic number. Yeah.
That when they post a job, they're required to post a range. And that's really impactful because it allows both employers to at least set some expectation. But as for you as someone looking for a job, at least you understand so you don't go all the way through applying for a job and find out that it's significantly below, what your expectations would be. So, know that but that also sets an expectation on you that do your research. Because data is available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Glassdoor is one of the famous places that people typically look for salary information. And that can be helpful, but sometimes, always, I'd say you need to dig in a little bit further. One of the adjustments you want to think about is not just for the job title that you're looking for, but the region that you're looking in, as the video showed, is really important, and cost of living is a thing to think about with respect to that. Also recognizing how your experience relates to the requirements for the job, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but being able to honestly in your own mind assess your experience against the job expectations, which are clearly listed in the ad, and to be able to say, if I tick all of these boxes, that really helps me be at the higher end of the scale in terms of what I should be expecting or what I should be offered, versus I'm trying to break into a new field, or I don't have experience in this particular industry or at this particular job. Certainly the employer is going to be thinking about that as a factor. So adjusting for your location, adjusting for what's happening with the economics of the industry that you're in, or the competition that you see, whether it's a small business or a large business, those kinds of things are really important. So it's not just looking up salary numbers on Glassdoor, it's the bigger picture of research, of understanding what is the dynamics that the company that you're looking to work for or the organization you want to work for is facing. And even if it's a sole proprietor entrepreneur that you're working for, you can probably still find some data and kind of poke around with it. So.
Yeah. And and as we talk about, again, getting to that conversation around salary, and then eventually as we talk a little bit about decision making around what is total compensation. Well, how do you even get to that point? And I know a lot of questions that I get asked is, well, I've submitted my resume and I don't hear anything.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of it is virtual. And so one of the key pieces of feedback I give people is, when you're looking at a job posting, look at the minimum requirements and make sure that your resume and or cover letter, if a cover letter's there, that you articulate in a way that whether it's technology or a human person looking at it, that they can see, okay, this person meets the minimum requirements. Because if you can't demonstrate that, it goes in a box or in a hole or somewhere where it doesn't get to the next level. So that's probably the most impactful thing you can do as you're out there applying for positions is really understand. If it says a minimum of 2 years of something, oftentimes, like I said, depending on the employer, it may be that it's running through technology that's screening for that. And if it doesn't see keywords or key requirements, you can't even get to you can't get to the next level, of review. So that's probably the most important thing I would say. And some employers, things are shifting. Some employers are no longer requiring cover letters. If they do, or if they, or if they're, it doesn't, or it's an option. I'm a big advocate of cover letters. And in fact, I was just reviewing some cover letters, so I was thinking about this morning. It's another opportunity for you to describe why the value that you would bring to an organization and how it fits for you. It's not a regurgitation of bullet points from your resume. Keep it clean, and it's a way to, like I said, this is where AI is an interesting dynamic in that you might feel like it can help you write things, but at the same the same point is make it personable, make it crisp, So, but again, if you do a cover letter, like I said, create that opportunity to say, hey, I'm looking at this job, maybe if it's out of region, because I'm looking at relocating to that area. Answer the questions for them that they might go, well, this person lives in Seattle, but they're looking for a job in Denver. Right. It's again, an opportunity. So those are things that you can do to kind of, like I said, get you moving forward in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I was previously the chief academic officer for this whole campus. So I've hired hundreds of faculty and staff and students around here, and most recently completed a search just this week and hired somebody. And one thing I've noticed is that we've always, it's been decades that keyword searches and technology has been used to screen resumes. So that's not something new. AI is a little more sophisticated in that and maybe a little more discerning. But I am actually seeing that in the broader pool. We're seeing more people who don't match the qualifications fully applying. And so you might have a large number of applicants, but a pretty significant percentage of them is just immediately going to get weeded out. Are you seeing that as well? Yeah. So my advice to applicants is don't spend the time, right? Spend the time searching for opportunities that might fit you. Don't spend your time applying for things for which you're not qualified. Most jobs will be very clear about the minimum qualifications, and they generally have a bunch of applicants who can meet those.
Yeah. How would you say that for I'm in finance, but even entry-level jobs these days, they want 1-2 years of experience. So if you're saying don't even waste your time applying to them, but if they're entry-level jobs, finance is trying to get our foot in the door.
Sure, and one of the big strategies for that is to do an internship, if that's still a possibility,
that's
right?
Exactly what I was going to say, do an internship, yeah.
Because that's a proxy for work experience that can be really valuable. And internships are one of the best resources anyway, in terms of companies getting to test drive an applicant. And a fair number of internships do convert into the opportunity for full-time work. But I think it depends on the company and the circumstances, right? If you are applying to a big national well-known firm and they're asking for 1 to 2 years of experience and you don't have it, you can almost guarantee there are going to be plenty of applicants who do have it, and you're not going to be competitive. So that's a big challenge. One of the other strategies for that is to look for smaller or more local opportunities that get you a little bit of experience, and with the plan that you're getting exposure and you're accumulating the kind of experience that'll then be attractive. And the entry-level position at a big firm may look very different than an entry-level position at a smaller firm, where you might get exposed to a lot more and actually learn a lot and be ready to if you want to jump to that bigger firm, be ready to move up quickly, because you actually have built a set of skills with a smaller firm that is really valuable.
And I would also say, required and preferred are very different. Different. So if it says prefer, like that, they're basically, that's what they, and again, there might be more competition. If it's required, but then also be looking at what other experience you have that you can define, respectfully, and transparently, that hey, this is really, whether you worked in, in a different field, but maybe has similar, maybe you're a bookkeeper for a family-owned business. I mean, there's things like that you can say, hey, this experience actually really fits that definition, without stretching it, too much. But like I said, when you look at, like I said, if it says required, that's one thing. But if it says preferred, then they're just kind of signaling that's really what we're looking for, but they still may be open.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And the other trend that we're seeing, and I think employers are seeing too, is a college degree, you're all here, is very, very valuable. But employers are also much more open to looking at experience in addition to, or sometimes in lieu of. So I think don't be shy about, all of your experiences. I mean, many people here that come through this university have, are veterans or have, experience as non-traditional students, and you've had a whole career before you come here, or you're here and you're working. All of those things play into helping you be competitive in whatever, as you're getting your degree and looking to switch into maybe more that dedicated focus. And I've had people that I've mentored here who were non-traditional students who were, one was getting her master's in data analytics, and she flat out asked me, will I be less competitive because I'm older? And my response to her was, no, because you understand the value of showing up on time, about working with people, and a lot of your other experience demonstrates how you work as part of a team, and all those are assets that you bring to this. So don't sell yourself short.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And in every field, employers continue to say that soft skills, which are the hard skills, right, are the most important thing. They're still always looking for communication and teamwork and leadership and initiative and all of those kinds of things. You should bring some technical skills or some expertise along with you as well that fits the job position. But being able to call upon the experiences you've had in your life that demonstrate those skills of being able to work effectively, and that show, as you were saying, your sort of your self-discipline and your reliability. Those things are extremely important as well.
Yes.
So
I think a little bit too about, so we're talking a little bit about kind of how you get to that point. You have the salary conversation, but I think then as we think about, you get to that point, and partly what we're introducing, the concept of total compensation. I'm just gonna, how many people have heard the term total compensation?
Okay. A lot. Good.
Good. And why that's important is when you think, okay, salary is one component. That's basically what you're going to get your paycheck every 1, 2, or 4 weeks, depending on the employer. And after they take the taxes out. But that's just one element. And, when you're looking at a decision around going to work for an employer, it's an investment that you're making, but it's also an investment in the employer is making in you.
Absolutely.
And so you want to understand the total value of that decision. And so the key things are when you think about benefits, what's the value? Does your employer pay for a component of your benefits? What is the cost of if you're going to get benefits through your employer? Time off, the value of time off. Do they invest in education and training? Those are kinds of things that all, are when we talk about total compensation, the total value that an employer brings to you as an employee. And, those make a difference. So if you're looking at 2 different job opportunities and say one's going to pay you $5,000 more a year than the other one, but you have to buy your own benefits, that from a total compensation perspective, you're going to earn less than, and if you think about it, they pay you a higher salary, and that's taxable income. I don't know if there's any accountants in here, versus the benefits that they give you you are not taxed. So, so when you think about every dollar they put to your benefits is a total dollar. Every dollar you get in your paycheck might be 75 cents, so it's understanding those. And one of the things I was telling Jill is, as I was kind of doing some updated research on this, and I think I looked at Reddit And there was a thread there where somebody was stating that total compensation is a way for employers to tell their employees that they're paying, that get away with underpaying them. And I thought, wow, that was kind of interesting. But I think it goes back to always understand the details. Because there may be employers out there that are trying to tout all of these things, but really I think being informed around making decisions and understanding, what are those things that are of value to me, and how do and does this employer fit my values, fit what I'm looking for in terms of return. So the concept of total compensation is really very, very important, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you just blanket. They give you a statement. It's like, oh, I get this versus this. It's you got to really dig in and ask questions.
Absolutely. So two thoughts on that. One is that even if you get nothing except an hourly wage or a salary, recognize that your employer is paying 30 to 35% more than that number when they're paying just their payroll taxes and their obligations to governmental agencies on behalf of you as an employee. So while some gets taken out of your paycheck, your employer is contributing to that as well. So your $50,000 salary may actually be more like a $75,000 or $80,000 cost to your company. And so that idea of the partial dollar really comes into play if you are in a position to negotiate, and if you're willing to accept a lower salary in exchange for higher benefits. Benefits costs vary very widely as much as benefits vary. So that may or may not be an advantage to your employer in thinking about how much they're spending to employ you. But no matter what, if you're adding benefits and things on top, your employer may easily be paying twice your salary when they pay all of the taxes and pay for all of those benefits that are involved. So it's helpful to think about it from their perspective. Most organizations do a pretty good job of letting you know up front on their website even what type of benefits are available, or it is something you can ask in an interview. The other one I wanted to mention was, you mentioned time off, and you've probably heard about unlimited time off, unlimited paid time off, which is a perk that is kind of common in the Seattle area, particularly with tech positions and that sort of thing. And there are a number of large companies, as well as some smaller ones, that have moved to this unlimited paid time off model. And that's an interesting one to think about because there are trade-offs. Obviously, it sounds great. Unlimited paid time off. Love it. I can just let people know when I'll be gone and disappear for a couple of weeks, and there's a lot of flexibility to it. However, the companies that offer that are very often companies that have outcome-based or performance-based employment, right? And bonuses and raises and things. And so if you take too much time off, you may actually be missing out on future compensation because you're not contributing in a way that earns you those same performance-based incentives. You may also be tied to rollout deadlines and other kinds of things that don't easily allow you to actually take the time off and feel okay about it. And the other piece of it is that a lot of employers that give a limited amount of time off will pay you out for that time when you change jobs, right? So you may accrue time off that you can actually get as a lump sum payment if you haven't used it at the time you separate from that employer. Unlimited paid time off takes that away. And so there's nothing to use or lose. So another question? Okay, perfect.
Doesn't it technically get rid of your pay because you can cash it out?
Well, if you are someone who doesn't use all your vacation and you would otherwise have cashed it out, absolutely, it could represent a loss at the end of that. I don't think most Americans get as much vacation that they can afford to just not take all their vacation, especially early in their careers. But certainly people may be thinking about that. It can have an immediate dollar value impact on you as well.
And I will say that there's emotional, psychological value in taking time off. So there's a value there in terms of sick leave, vacation, or many organizations PTO, and typically paid time off is a combination of that. So employers have different, and understanding what that models are. Do they track it? Is it unlimited? But yeah, but again, the concept is in terms of supporting employees, having time off is important. The other thing is right now is this kind of rebalancing of remote work. During the pandemic, it was for those positions that were not essential workers or could be done remotely. Basically, everybody, worked remotely. And then a lot of employers said, well, fine, you can live anywhere and work remotely. And a couple of things started happening with that is in some cases, some organizations, productivity, stayed the same or went up. In a lot of organizations, productivity went down. Or what you had was, was you had employees that you could live anywhere and you decide, oh, I'll take this job. And so the rate of turnover, because there wasn't as much skin in the game. Mm-hmm. So when you have to relocate yourself or your family, that's a bigger decision. But if you can work in some remote place and I can just switch jobs tomorrow because it pays me more. So employers went, well, wait a minute, maybe this isn't as attractive to us. And so you're seeing this balance, with some employers are bringing their employees back 5 days a week. Some are doubling down. We at the port, we have a hybrid. So we're for about half our workforce, we're all in 2 days a week, and then up to 3 days a week. We may work remotely if we don't need to be in the office. That's worked really well for us. A lot of employers that you're seeing in Seattle are coming back partly because excuse me. Oh, I got it.
You are seeing a lot of employers in Seattle having people come back to work, as I'm sure you've heard, and everybody's heard the traffic reports and everything. Yeah. And part of that is sort of for civic benefit reasons, right? That there are a lot of smaller businesses that were very dependent on having Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all the big players having people there in the downtown and in South Lake Union and supporting the lunch businesses and all of those other kinds of businesses. And so it's not just to the benefit of the organization to have people back in the office, it's to the benefit of the city. And we're seeing more of those kinds of pressures. And the bottom line for that, for total compensation, is that work from home may be a significantly less negotiable thing than it was a year or two ago.
Since work from home was so significant the past few years, I've heard stories about people working multiple jobs at one time because they could.
Yeah.
Have you guys experienced that too much?
Not really. Companies that have found that to be a significant problem have found ways to move on from that and have found ways to monitor. And so you've seen all kinds of interesting technology things happen where your screens are being tracked, your mouse movement is being tracked by your employer, and they're monitoring what your work output is a lot more closely, which is sort of a different kind of trade-off of having that kind of scrutiny happening. I would imagine that most people who are trying to be successful and actually are invested in their job are not going to try to do another job at the same time. It doesn't mean they don't have a side hustle, right? A side hustle, but not trying to work two jobs at the same time, because it's going to be discovered. Because there is a lot more monitoring of that happening.
I would say that the hardest thing that we're grappling with as employers and employees is childcare. Yeah. The whole, the pre-pandemic, if you were working remotely, that was absolutely not the case. But now you have a lot of people working a hybrid and childcare, part-time childcare is hard. So it's that balance of, but you're home with your kids, or how does that work, and how does the productivity work? And so I would say that's kind of huge. The broader thing that has been kind of thrown up into chaos, that how do we balance, the employee having that flexibility but staying focused, and the issue of, having small children at home. So I think that's more prevalent in terms of struggling than the occasional, you hear the story, somebody's working a couple of jobs. Well, it catches up with them. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
What's that?
Getting paid well at the time.
Yes, but that's a short-term fix to something that will probably impact them long-term. I'm going to say that's really more the exception. And the other thing I would say is, in many cases, if that's happening, those were people that were finding ways around the system before the pandemic. It didn't just create a bunch of people that decided that they were going to shortcut the system.
Well, and I think the thing to think about too is that as the labor market gets more competitive, I know that people who have been in those kinds of positions are not performing at the level, right? Companies 2 years ago were more tolerant of lower productivity because they were still trying to grapple with the fact that the labor force wasn't strong. The labor force supply is pretty strong right now. And so there's no reason to hang on to somebody who's a mediocre performer, which means that getting the job is one thing and keeping the job is another thing. And I've got to tell you, my daughter is a 2022 graduate of UW Tacoma and is still working the job she got out of school and absolutely loves it. But she's seen a lot of new hires out of university come and go, not last for more than 4 to 6 months, because they don't have the soft skills and she works in tech. They don't have the soft skills, or they don't have the attitude of working hard. And it is a hybrid company, so they're in the office 3 days, they're at home 2 days. And some people don't really want to work those 2 days because they're at home. And those people quickly are discovered and let go, and they're pretty easy to replace. So that's the evidence I have just from an N of one. But I thought it was very interesting that the company was super aware and able to figure this out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Let's pause and see what other questions?
I have a question about negotiation. At what point does that start?
Excellent.
Going back and forth, like how are you supposed to talk when you're doing this?
Excellent question.
Yeah,
First of all, if you're not graduating like right away, you might consider taking Team Management 457, which is negotiation. It's a fantastic class, and you'll learn a lot, and you'll actually get practice and experience in negotiating, making offers, counter offers, and all of that. So if you have the room for it in your schedule, it's highly recommended. Team Management 457, negotiation, yeah. So above and beyond that, the time to start talking about salary is usually not in the early stages of the interview, right? Oftentimes, it's not something that really comes up until an offer is made. And because in Washington, we have salary ranges that are published at large for all good-sized firms, it shouldn't be a mystery to you. But how do you open the conversation, or where does that conversation come from? In my experience, it's typically the employer who offers and kind of says, this is what we're looking at, or this is what we would like to offer you. Because managers are managing their budgets, and they're managing in conjunction often with HR staff and thinking about how to manage their overall labor costs and how that's going to affect their accounting statements and their bottom line. So all of that, put yourself in the shoes of the person you're negotiating with and think about what their concerns and their interests are. Right? They don't necessarily just have an open checkbook to be able to give you, right? And oftentimes, for many organizations, public organizations, there are policies and grade levels and things that people are bound to. So they don't necessarily have that full flexibility. But I will say, anytime that as an employer you make an offer to somebody, you are immediately then looking for cues that they have done their homework. Right? That they have some idea of how that stands. I don't know. There are some employers who will ask you what your salary expectations are, and sometimes they will do that in the application process, which means you have to do your homework a lot earlier. But when it comes to actually negotiating salary on your own behalf, I think you have to go in with clear knowledge and clear goals for yourself, right? So one of the things you might think about, working from the operating point of knowledge of what is the range for this position, or what's reasonable for this job, this company, this location, and my level of fit with the job, right? Start with that in mind. And then start thinking about, well, what are my boundaries personally within that range? What's the lowest that I would accept to do this job, given all of the pieces of it, the kind of work, the kind of opportunities, how much work from home, all of the stuff that's not necessarily quantifiable, given how do you feel about that position, what's the least I would accept, right? So that you have a basement number in your head that you're not going to feel bad, because you don't want to go in and have a job where you work for 3 months and you're like, ugh, I can't afford to keep this job. That's not helpful to your resume to have a 3-month job, right? And your employer bears a lot of costs in replacing you. So being really clear about what you expect. But you also should have a top end, like a realistic, what could I, like the perfect job with the perfect offer, and they really loved me and they really wanted me. What's the most I would reasonably expect given my experience? So knowing your own private range, and I emphasize private, you're not necessarily going in and telling your employer, well, this is sort of my bottom line, because they will push you to your bottom line, right? Possibly. And you're also not saying, well, open high because I'm worth this. I think this is the absolute best, because that's probably has the potential to be offensive as well. But understanding their range and understanding what your range is, I think, is a good place to start with the preparation piece of it.
Yeah, and I think I would add on to that is, one, if you get to the offer point, you always have that, I love that, have the range, but then you really aren't in an informed decision until you really get an offer. And that kind of goes back to the whole total compensation, because you got to see the whole picture. I would say, a good employer, you need to get something in writing. And I know of people who, they got a verbal offer and they're waiting, and then nothing else came. It's like, red flag. So, so then you can really evaluate. And then I would say the power of a question can be very impactful, because once you can ask, hey, where does this salary fit in the range of the position? Based on my experience, where versus one of the things we talk about is total competency in a role, and it might take so if you're coming in with less experience than what would the role, you're going to be lower in the range. That's typically how they structure, whether it's private sector or public sector that has a range. And these are positions, keep in mind, that are not part of a collective bargaining agreement. If it's a job that's under a collective bargaining agreement or a union agreement, they're going to have set rates, and it might be you come in at 90%, and then in 6 months, then you're at 100, and that they're just understanding that's the power of that agreement. But then, really, you don't have the ability to negotiate something from that. But get it in writing, look at it, and like I said, if you're not sure, you can ask and say, hey, based on my experience, where do I fit in that? Where do you see me fitting? Or I think I fit higher in the range for these reasons. And then you see if, maybe you can get a little bit. But then it allows the employer to tell you how they see you coming in. Because it doesn't fit if the employer lowballs somebody because they think you can get away with it, and then 3 months later you get in and then you find out everybody else negotiated better, you're not going to be satisfied. That's not healthy for the employer either. But like I said, I think a lot of times asking the question allows you to gather more information from the employer in terms of how they handle these kinds of things.
Absolutely. And I think you always want to be looking at the whole package. You don't want to negotiate issue by issue, because for the employer, they're thinking about it as a package of costs associated with the job. And you should be thinking about it as an employee as a package of benefits that you receive, your salary and all of your benefits and all of those kind of things. So don't negotiate things in isolation. But if you do engage, I think Erin's advice is brilliant in terms of asking the right questions. And one of the questions that is always helpful to ask is opportunities for how can pay increase? What are the opportunities, right? Are there bonuses? Is it sort of a standard cost of living adjustment? Are there performance incentives? Is it possible for people to get raises outside of an annual or regular cycle? What kind of opportunities are there? And those questions are particularly important if the offer you receive is lower than what you expected, but you're still inclined to take it because maybe it's the only offer you have or it's the best offer that you have. You can still indicate your eagerness to advance in terms of being a great performer and being rewarded for a great performer by asking those questions. And most employers are attuned to those signals of somebody saying, look, I see myself here. I want to be able to fit in and advance and be successful here. So if I am performing at a high level, how might I be rewarded? So that can be part of the opening conversation as well. Most raises that come later on are based on a percentage of your initial salary, right? So the higher number you start off with, compound interest, right, over time is an important factor. But some companies do have just, pure bump kinds of raises where it's like, it's a $5,000 bump from wherever you are, and it's not a percentage of your salary. So understanding how that works at a given organization is pretty important.
There was a question.
Oh, please.
So I'm a staff member here at UW, and my primary work experience is very much like soft skilled. A lot of my job history is very like customer service driven, stuff like that. And so I'm curious, how would I leverage that when I'm thinking about my private salary negotiation versus an employer's negotiation, when I'm still kind of learning more hard skilled stuff, but I don't have that yet?
I think for any position, it's always matching it to the expectations for the position. And if it is primarily a more technically skilled kind of thing, and you are less experienced at that, you are probably going to come in a little lower, but you may shine in comparison to other people in all of those skills, and those communication skills and teamwork skills. And I think you might want to emphasize the opportunity to demonstrate those skills and then be rewarded for how they positively impact the team or the customer service or whatever other elements are part of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That was perfect. Yeah, it's really documented, because sometimes you're right, you get the opportunity, but then as you grow, as your skills grow, employers are smart to make sure that your pay grows with it, because as your skills grow, you also become competitive outside the organization.
Absolutely.
So, but it's also incumbent on each of you to document, here's how I'm delivering against this job. Here's how I'm going above and beyond. Here's how I'm mastering competency in the role. So as your technical skills are growing and you're able to articulate that, you help your manager, depending on the system of compensation that you're in, then they may, their role is to try and help your salary grow as your skills grow. And that's because if you don't do that, then in theory you become more competitive outside the organization.
I think a lot of employers will say that we'd rather hire for soft skills and attitude and train for technical skills, because the other stuff is hard to learn. Like the soft skills are hard. They are hard, and if you're not skilled at those things, you can really derail multiple people and projects.
What are some of the most important soft skills that you look for in a candidate?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because I've been thinking that, and I come back to, like I said, the power of a question is so impactful, because it's so details matter. How you treat people matters. And so that sense of humility and curiosity is so impactful, because, and don't think that confidence has to come in a way that is overbearing. Confidence can come in the way of saying, hey, I think I can do this job, and here's the things I bring, but I'm willing to learn, or I listen to people. Being able, because it's very hard to solve problems if you go in thinking you already know the answer, or if you're not really hearing people. So when I'm hiring somebody, I'm looking for, sometimes there's a certain level of technical, but can they listen to people? And that part of it is so critical, because if they, because it goes back to all of the other pieces. Because if you can listen to people, you can be part of a team. If you can listen to people, you can be respectful. It's when you go into it not really being self-aware, and that's the other last thing I'll say is, there is no one checklist. It's if you're really transparent on who you are as an individual, and you're consistent with that, and you own it. I'm a huge extrovert. So one of the interesting things for me as I got into leadership positions, I had to start realizing that I had to verbalize, oh, hey, I don't want you to do what I'm saying. I want to make sure we're getting to the right answer. So giving people permission to say, challenge me, tell me if that's a stupid idea. But being self-aware, if I wasn't self-aware of that, basically I'd have people going off and doing things that maybe weren't really in the best answer because I don't know. So know yourself, know how you process information. But like I said, I really, for what I look for is people can listen and work with others, and that critical thinking around solving problems are so important.
I absolutely agree. I think there are a lot of people who don't demonstrate much actual interest in their work. They're not curious. They're not wanting to learn more. They're not wondering how they could do better. They're not expressing that, and they're not engaging. They want to look competent, and therefore maybe are afraid to be vulnerable and ask questions. And so people who have a mindset for learning, and they have a mindset for improving and engaging, whether you're introverted or extroverted, you can still demonstrate that. And then I think that piece that you talked about, which maybe you could also label sort of like emotional intelligence, knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, but being really aware of other people. I remember firing somebody at our small business who couldn't control their temper. Right? And just would mouth off inappropriately. It's like, you're making everyone else here uncomfortable, and we need to let you go. Great worker, I don't care.
Yes.
You're bringing everybody down, you're gone. So that kind of self-control and self-management, but also recognizing, especially when you're working with people across a wide variety of age groups and disciplines and experiences, that you may rub somebody else the wrong way and they may rub you the wrong way, but we all have to function together. And how can I learn to manage that when I'm really frustrated by somebody, or I'm just being me and they're kind of giving me the evil eye because that's not working for them. And there is a lot of that kind of give and take, especially when you're working in the office, but it's sometimes even worse on Zoom, on work from home.
And the group study, the group projects that you all do in different classes, as painful as those are, that's probably one of the most impactful things you can take out of your education. Because guess what? In the real life, you're working with people on projects, and you'll have the person that kind of doesn't really want to take on extra work, or the person that you perceive really isn't engaged, or the person that wants to control everything. And and that's real life.
Laughing from experience, we've seen it.
So those, like I said, there's a lot of things in the educational environment that are, things you got to do that that maybe you won't pull out of the toolbox as often, but honestly, those group projects, what you can take away from it is there's getting the product done, but it's also learning the different, personalities and how do I resolve conflict. And, one of the things that's pretty classic with those, you're like, oh, I just got to survive till it's done and I'll never have to deal with it again. You know what? That's really, it's just putting off the inevitable because it will happen again. And that is in the workplace. That's real. So that ability to really have the energy to say, you know what? I think maybe I wasn't, I didn't interact with that person in a way, or maybe I was having a bad day, or really kind of sensing how people are responding to your style and having the courage to maybe go have, not in the moment, but have a conversation. That's hard. And actually coming out of the pandemic, I think it's probably, 3 times as hard because, you're on a screen. And, but those kinds of things, what really breaks down the workplace is people not getting along.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times why people aren't getting along is because there's perceived conflicts.
Yeah.
Not understanding, each other's work. So again, those kinds of things are the things that help you. There's the getting the job, but then there's the keeping the job, and there's the enjoying the job. And those are the kinds of things that I think really make a difference. People don't, there's lots of studies. People don't necessarily leave because of pay. I mean, that's part of it. The number one reason people leave is their direct supervisor. That is absolutely. I know the last time I've been working 40 years. I mean, I think the studies all, that is. So, as you think about your, understanding that relationship with your supervisor, but also as people that come into management positions, that's really important that we understand that. And so,
Absolutely.
Dealing with those those challenges when you're early on, and building that muscle in it, nobody likes doing it, but it's really important that the sooner that you kind of build that competency, the more resilient you'll be with whatever situation you're in.
We're at 1:20, but if you want to keep asking questions, we have the room till like 3 o'clock.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Another
I
question.
know this would be like a case-by-case basis, but if you're looking at like your private salary range, is there a recommended, like if I make, 40 grand a year, should I start my bottom range 20 grand more than what I currently make? Or should I shoot for 30 grand more, whatever?
I think it's not about you. I think it's about the job.
Yeah.
And so if you want to target jobs that meet that kind of difference, and you are qualified for them, by all means go for it. But jobs are evaluated on what their contribution is and relative to the framework of the larger organization. There's the piece of it where you figure out how to get the qualifications to get where you want to be salary-wise. But I can almost guarantee that no organization really cares about that from your perspective, because they're only thinking of their perspective. So I think that's a lot. There's a lot of self-work involved in figuring that piece of it out.
Sally, what?
Sometimes when you're applying for a job, they make you put your current salary in for each job, and I always hate that because I feel like they are going to pigeonhole you into some sort of range. Is there a way to avoid that, or do you just have to fill out that section?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I would say, if they ask you, what you don't want to do is eliminate yourself because you didn't fill out something.
Exactly.
But again, if they're a good, solid employer and they have a range and you've articulated your experience, then you have the opportunity to say, it really shouldn't be about what you're making today. It should be about where you fit in their compensation structure.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, so-
I agree. I hate that.
Yeah.
So I have a question when it comes to job shadowing. Does that necessarily count as work experience as well, or no?
It's a great opportunity to put it somewhere in there or in a cover letter or something like that. But in terms of actually counting it as actual experience, no.
It's not employment.
That'd be a bit of a
se.
stretch. Yeah. Now that's again back to internships. That really does count as legitimate experience when you're thinking about applying. So, and I know people are having to leave, but I really appreciate everybody coming and listening. And this is our second time doing this, so we're getting in a rhythm.
Have fun. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.